Welcome to A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose, a worldwide web event. Okay, let's see some of the questions you're sending us now on email. I have Deborah in Manville, Louisiana, okay, who says, I'm having difficulty transitioning from the beauty of my youth to living with a face and body that has aged. How do we let go of that kind of possession or obsession, especially as a woman in a society obsessed with youth and beauty? Fantastic question, Deborah.
Yes.
Fantastic question. Same thing as being attached to the identity enhancers of clothes and things and cars and having. Yes. Yeah.
No,
that's harder though.
It is hard. It's particularly hard for people who are good looking. Mm-hmm. That was never my problem, fortunately, but I had other problems. I had a huge mind that says, I'm the greatest intellectual. That was my identification. Uh-huh. And then I suffered more and more, and finally I had to let go. But so you identify with whatever is the most obvious in your life. So if you have good looks, then you're most likely to identify with that. Probably even more so for a woman than a man. And so, and that for...
Particularly in our society.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for quite a few years that works quite well, but then at some point you realize that the body does get old. Yeah. And time, the monster time, does something to the body.
Yeah, I always thought this too. I don't know, Deborah and Manville, but I always thought pretty women would have a really hard time, because if you grow up and that is your identity and everybody says how beautiful you are and you're a pretty little girl and you're great and beautiful, 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 when that starts to fade, then who are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is why it's important, even at an early age, when you still feel very comfortable with your external appearance, to already see if you can bring a deeper dimension into your life so that you don't live the rest of your life trapped in the surface dimension when you equate who you are with your external appearance, which is not going to last.
Well, she says, I'm having difficulty transitioning.
Yes.
From the beauty of my youth to living with a face and body that is aged.
Yes. So the question then perhaps is, so what to do now?
Yes. How do we let go of that kind of obsession?
So first of all, again, the arising awareness is important, that you had been, and to some extent perhaps still are, identified with appearance.
Right.
And then comes in a little thing that we could call acceptance. Acceptance, when you look in the mirror in the morning, you realize, yes, one can see wrinkles here and there. The skin is not quite as vibrant as it used to be, and you can see it very clearly. And so some of these people who had been identified, they regard that as a personal problem. They see it as if life had dealt them some blow that it's not personal, it's the destiny of every human being to grow old and to, unless they die prematurely, it's the destiny of every human being to experience the gradual decline of the physical form. So what you're experiencing is the destiny of all humans that have ever lived on the planet and ever will live on the planet. So I suggest, first of all, to practice a little bit of acceptance. I say it's not my personal problem, it's the destiny of humanity. It's just my share in that. And also, with that comes, with any kind of acceptance, comes a little spaciousness. Because here you have the condition.
Yeah, it leaves a space between resisting it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
wanting it to be different.
Yes. So you have the condition, which means I'm getting old, or the body is getting old, and then you accept that this is what's happening. With that acceptance comes a little bit of space around the condition, a little bit of peace around the condition.
Yeah.
And then a very helpful thing.
That is, instead of saying, I hate my wrinkles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's the same process. You look at a flower. You have a flower for a few days, and the same thing that's happening to your body happens to the flower after a few days. It wilts. Or put an apple there and see what the apple looks like 3 weeks later. It just happens more quickly. But it's the destiny of all form to eventually dissolve.
So Deborah needs to come to some acceptance of that.
And see that it's the destiny of all of life forms to go through that process. In addition, also, especially for people who have been identified with the external body, because it was beautiful for many years, to take attention, even when they're still young, to what we've been doing here, take attention into the inner body, the inner aliveness of the body. Because that actually does not grow old, because you can feel the aliveness when you're 80, it's the same way that you can feel the inner aliveness when you're 20. So instead of always stopping with the external appearance, spend time sensing the inner body rather than always staying with the external.
When you shared the story in the book, I forgot which page that was, the ring story. Oh, the lost ring on page 38. And you told the story of the woman who had was deteriorating and accused her maid of stealing the ring, and then you asked her the question.
Yes. I asked, do you feel diminished in who you are now that you've lost the ring? Do you actually feel diminished in your sense of self? And at first she said, yes, of course I do. And then she stopped and then she started going to within. And I asked her, what your sense of self, take your attention, what does it mean to feel yourself? And eventually she was able to go deeper within and feel her sense of presence had nothing to do with the ring. In fact, she felt it more strongly because the identification with the external object had gone.
Yes, and I brought that story up because you say that as her body began to fade, that her inner light became more luminous, that she became...
Yes, almost like light shining through. She became, and I've experienced that several times with people that I have known who got close to death. They had an illness, they knew they were going to die, and they lived in a state of acceptance. They accepted every moment. And those people not only became very peaceful inside because they had relinquished all identification with the external form.
All right.
And then something else that was deeper than the form, that all religions really point to that in every human being there is a dimension that we could call the eternal or the sacred.
The formless.
The formless.
Let's go to our Chicago study groups watching our webcast at Borders on Michigan Avenue. Hi, everybody. Hi. I hear Sharon has a question. Sharon?
Hi, Oprah. Hello, Mr. Tolle. I'm so excited to talk to you. I have a question. I have close relationships to people who suffer from depression. And in talking with them and trying to be useful to my friends when they talk to me about a bout of depression or what have you, I find that there is an inwardness and a strong identity that they have as people who suffer from depression. And I wonder, what role does the ego play in depression, and to what extent is it helpful to sort of point them toward this definition of the ego, the content identity and the structural identity? I mean, or is it unfair for me to feel that should be useful, given that you know, there seems to be a strong identification with themselves as people who suffer from depression.
Yes, that again brings us back to an earlier question where whether the condition is a physical condition that one suffers from or whether it is a psychological condition that one suffers from. There is the tendency to identify oneself with the illness or with the whatever it is.
Right, I'm a depressed person.
Yes, and then...
And I'm depressed because I'm identifying with my whole story.
Yes.
And my story is sad.
Yes.
And that would make me depressed, yeah.
Yes.
That's what people are saying, yeah.
Yes, if you're very strongly identified with my sad story, which for many people, yes, the story is sad. I had a sad story for many years until I let go of it.
And you were in depression. You were depressed.
I was depressed, yes. And until one night I woke up and I realized that this unhappy self is not who I am. I could sense the I amness that came from a much deeper level than me and my story and my unhappy self. And I described that as the self that I could no longer live with. I asked myself, what is that self? Who am I? Am I that self? No, I am I. I am consciousness. I am presence.
I am.
I am. So the question, of course, is what do you tell your friend? Because it's not easy to tell a person that you are identified with an ego image, and very likely you will get resistance.
Correct. They'll say, what is wrong with you?
Yes.
Yes. They go, what is your problem?
I would suggest doing it in a more subtle way, and that is perhaps point out the possibility of becoming aware of one's thought processes, of thoughts that arise. Instead of being totally identified with the thoughts, perhaps you can tell your friend what you have been doing for yourself. You can tell, then it's not threatening to the ego. If you tell something that you have been doing, you've been observing your own thoughts, and you're more detached now from your thoughts than you were before, and you realize that thoughts are only thoughts. They're not who you are. If you can tell them about yourself, that could help.
Yeah.
When there's
But many times if you're depressed, I think you're so attached to the story. The story works for you, you know? The idea of being a depressed person works for you.
Yes. So it's good. Sometimes depression comes in waves for some people. So you go through periods, and then the good time is when you come out of it, and then is a good time because then you're more aware than when you're down in the depression. Then perhaps talk to when you see your friend is at that point.
This brings us to something you were saying at the end of last week's session, though. As you're trying to share this information, everybody, with your friends, Eckhart said at the end of last week's class that the most you can do is ask yourself, are you ready to awaken? Are you ready to be more present, more alive for yourself? Because you really cannot bring other people along unless they are also ready.
Yes, but sometimes you bring other people along simply because you embody a different state of consciousness, even while you sit with them. They may be telling you their sad story, but you don't buy into the sad story, nor do you question the sad story. You're just there as a spacious, conscious presence.
Right.
No resistance, just conscious presence.
All right.
And sometimes that transmits itself, and suddenly the person wakes up for a moment. I had that experience, I believe I describe it, I don't remember whether it's in this book or in The Power of Now. I had a neighbor many years ago who always was close to a nervous breakdown. Whenever I met her, she would come with extremely complicated stories of what other people were doing to her and how she always wanted something from me to join her in her struggle against other people. One night she was ringing my bell at 10:30 or 11 at night, and through the intercom she said, can I come up? There's something very important to talk about. So she came up in great distress and said something about she hadn't paid the service charge and so on, and we had to fight them and so on. And I found myself going just into a state of alert presence, just alert, allowing her to speak, no thinking, just allowing her to say what she had to say, feeling quite peaceful. And suddenly she stopped talking, and she looked around, and she had brought all these papers to look at all over the floor.
Yeah, to verify her position.
Story.
Yeah.
And suddenly she looked around and said, this isn't important at all, is it? And I said, no. And she said, thank you. And she got her papers and walked out. And the next morning I saw her, she came to me in the street. She said, what did you do to me last night? Last night was the first night that I slept well in years and years. The first night after that happened.
What did you do to her?
Now, the thing is, I did nothing. I was just there present for her. So there was no doing.
Not buying into the story.
Not buying into the story.
Not empowering the story.
And not feeding her thought processes. And not resisting their thought processes either.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks, everybody at Borders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Borders.
Thank you.
We have Kathy from Beijing, China on the phone with a question. Hello, Kathy from Beijing.
Hi, Oprah and Eckhart. Hello. I just want to say this is huge that we can have this one conversation around the world. I'm a girl from Duluth, Minnesota, living in Beijing, China, and I'm talking to Oprah in Chicago and Eckhart.
I think that's
My
fun.
question,
Yeah, go ahead.
my question is, I lost 30 pounds in the last year, and for me, it has been spiritual work. It's not just on the surface weight loss. And now my friends are asking me about it and how I did it. And I'm wondering how to explain that it is this whole spiritual process. It's not just what you eat and how you exercise, but for me, it's been life-changing. And they look at me like I'm like mentally ill when I try to explain all of that.
A friend of mine and I were talking about this the other day, about allowing yourself to be fed from the energy that's already there inside your body. I know what you're talking about. Checking in.
I know you know.
Huh? Yeah. Checking,
I know you know.
Yeah, checking in, being conscious, aware of what you're feeding yourself, and aware of how you are in touch with your body to give your body just what your body needs. And so then it becomes not about the diet and the food and the how many reps you did, but about being aware.
Right.
Yeah.
But most of the world is focused on how it's just the surface, what
Yeah.
you eat.
Yeah.
Yes, it's being in touch with the body helps greatly, because the body knows what it needs. Really, the overeating happens because it's part of the ego,
Unconsciousness.
the unconsciousness, which
yeah.
seeks a substitute for the sense of aliveness.
Yeah, I can say that for sure. And you know that too, right, Kathy?
Yeah, now I know too.
Yes. Yeah. Well, now you know how to explain it to all your friends.
Thank you.
It's so cool talking to you from Beijing. What time is it there?
It's 9 o'clock in the morning, and I am able to watch it successfully this week. I was like others and didn't get it last week, but
We're still up and
miracle.
out. That's great. I know. I have listen, I have the Skype people and the Limelight people and the Move people and the Oprah.com people, and I just walked through the hall as we started this, and I said to all of them, "May the force be with you," and this is this is what I'm doing. Hello.
But you can make things happen.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much. I want to go back to the identification with things, because that is an issue for so many people. The unchecked striving for more, for endless growth, you say, is a dysfunction and a disease on page 37, like the cancer cell whose only goal is to multiply itself, unaware that it's bringing about its own destruction by destroying the organism of which it is a part. I heard we had a shopaholic on Skype. I saw that earlier. Did we bring her back? Yeah, isn't that?
Yes.
Okay, we have Joyce from Minnesota who is Skyping us. Joyce, what is your question? I thought this applied to you.
Yeah, it does, and unfortunately, it applies to my son as well. Last week, he came home from kindergarten, and I said, "I'm so happy to see you, and I'm in such a good mood." And he said, "Oh, good. Does that mean we get to go shopping?" And I thought, it's rubbing off on him. So what my question is how do I reverse that process in him?
Well, first of all, let me ask you this. You're reading the book, correct?
Yes.
Right. So you've gotten through chapter 2 already?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you read that, did you see yourself in the pages?
I did. The aha for me was in seeing of who you are not, your real self emerges through something along those lines.
My favorite quote, and one of my favorite quotes in this chapter is, when you can no longer feel the life that you are,
yes,
you are likely to try to fill up your life with things.
Things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would that be what you're trying to do?
That was me. Since I've started reading this book, I've gotten so much better. I'm not searching for that thing anymore. I think I was trying to find my identity in things. And since I've stopped that, and I really don't have any interest in that anymore, I've discovered so much more about myself. I'm artistic, and I'm doing sculptures and just things I never did before. So it's working out great. I just want to know how to enforce that in my son as well, since he's only 5.
Oh, well, now the most important change has already happened in you. So you've become aware of the old pattern, you've gone beyond it, and it's inevitable that now this will even if you don't say anything, it will transmit itself to your son also. When after a while your son sees that the importance that you give to acquiring things has diminished, then he will also reflect that. This is how it works with young children.
It will take some time.
Yes.
Because since he's been a baby, you've been a shopaholic. That's the way you described yourself to our producers. And so that's what he has seen. That's what he's taken in. That's what he identifies with as pleasure.
Yes.
And when you say, I'm in a good mood and things are going well, let's go shopping, Mommy, because that's what Mommy's always done.
Yes. Another thing that, that perhaps you could do is to point out things to him that are of intrinsic value that you cannot buy. So, for example, the natural world. Whatever you see out in nature is of infinite intrinsic value, and you can't buy it. So don't pick flowers, for example. Don't encourage him to, because that's the acquisition instinct, the instinct to, oh, I want that for myself. Why not allow the flower to be there and enjoy it for a few seconds as you look at it? So point out things and engage in activities perhaps that involve nature, and see that is of greater value than anything that you see in the shopping mall. And it doesn't mean that you don't buy anything anymore. Occasionally you may come across something that looks truly beautiful, that speaks to you, and you may acquire it, but it's no longer compulsive.
You say we need to honor the world of things, not despise it, but we cannot honor things if we try to find ourselves through them.
Yes.
And how do we honor them?
You honor them by giving them attention. I have a few possessions that I love, and sometimes I just hold them, look at them. They're beautiful to look at. If somebody stole them, that's fine. Somebody else wants them more than I. It's fine. You let go. There's no identification, but there can be enjoyment in things. You can enjoy you might come across a beautiful picture and you buy it. You might come across a beautiful fabric. Whatever it may be, you see beauty there. And sometimes it will be enough to acknowledge beauty in a shop window and say, oh, isn't that beautiful? Of course, I don't need it. And you walk on, and you can, and that's a thought. There's a lot of...
That's a thought I never had.
There's a lot of freedom
It's
in
beautiful. Let's leave it there. I can just admire its beauty. What about that, Joyce? It's beautiful. Let's leave it in the window.
It's the same as the flower. You don't need to pick it.
That's a thought.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Enjoying, you can walk around. Occasionally, I don't do it anymore, but I sometimes would enjoy walking around a few stores. Or when I lived in London, I would sometimes walk down Regent Street, all these beautiful stores.
Window shop.
Window shopping. Look in. Oh, how nice. Would I want to buy it? No. Even if
you can just accept that it's beautiful and let it be.
Then let it be.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Joyce, so much. We have from India, I don't know the name of this country, Priyanka.
Sri Lanka?
No, the person's name is Priyanka from Mumbai, India. When we try to change our bad habits for good, then aren't we trying to resist rather than accept ourselves? When we try to change our bad habits for good, aren't we trying to resist rather than accept ourselves?
Yes. It's not that you change your bad habits. The bad habits drop away when you bring awareness to them. So it's not me trying to change something inside me, but when you bring awareness to old conditioned forms of behavior or thinking, when you bring awareness to it, those old conditioned forms of behavior or thinking, after a while, drop away by themselves. So it's not me trying to bring about a change, it's the arising awareness, and then change happens. Like the lady we just talked to, she read the chapter on shopping, and that immediately brought her to this point of awareness. And with the awareness, the compulsion immediately lessened.
Eased.
Yes.
You talk about the illusion of ownership on page 42. You say the ego tends to equate having with being and lives through comparison. And you use a quote from the Bible that Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," Jesus said, "for theirs will be the kingdom of heaven." What does poor in spirit mean? No inner baggage, no identifications. I never knew that's what poor in spirit means.
Yeah.
How did you come to that interpretation of what poor in spirit means?
There was a time after I went through this inner shift, it must have been 3 years later, I was visiting my mother and she had a New Testament on her shelf. I picked it up and I started reading. I could suddenly see the truth that was hiding there, and that in many cases the conventional interpretation was the superficial one of what Jesus had said. And that was one of the things that I immediately saw when he said poor in spirit. I realized it's to do with not carrying stuff inside, so that your spirit is very light, it has no burden. And so there were many things at that time I read, and I suddenly saw, oh, he was talking about awakening and about living in that free state of consciousness. Wonderful suddenly to be able to read it, and suddenly it all makes sense, which before hadn't made sense.
You also talk about renunciation of possessions will not automatically free you of the ego, that there are people who have renounced all possessions but have a bigger ego than some millionaires.
Yes.
So if you take away one kind of identification, the ego will quickly find another. For instance, I'm a more spiritual person than you are.
Yes.
We see this all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's identification.
People use their religion to say, I'm better than you are because
yes. Or even an image of myself as a spiritual person. I'm more spiritual than you.
Yes.
For example, there could be, theoretically, you could have a man driving a Rolls Royce, and then in the same street, a man riding a bicycle, and it is quite possible, not necessarily, of course, it could be the other way around, but it's quite possible that the man on a bicycle may have a bigger ego than the Rolls Royce if he thinks of himself as spiritually superior to the man in the Rolls Royce. And so the ego compares itself always to others,
yes,
in order to find some superiority somewhere.
Yes, because another favorite quote is that anytime you feel yourself superior or inferior to anybody, it is always your ego.
Yes, and that's very interesting. You can observe yourself then in many situations, because the ego always looks out when you come into a group of people or you meet new people, and it wants to position itself somewhere. Am I better looking than this person, or am I more knowledgeable than this person, or am I more wealthy than this person, or is this person more wealthy than me? So it tries to position itself, and that then leads either to a sense of superiority,
yeah,
or inferiority, and both are ego.
Yes. Well, what made me also think about one of the situations in our country in particular, here in the United States, is that people live lives in debt. They're indebted, credit card debt, overwhelmed by debt, because of what you talk about on page 46, wanting, the need for more. Wanting keeps the ego alive much more than having.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Now, that's again a structure of the ego,
yes,
because we've been talking about content and
yes,
structure, and one of the main structures of the ego is it is never satisfied. So, for example, when you have attained a goal or attained something that you wanted,
I got a nice house.
Not a nice house.
Nice things in the house.
And after a little while, it no longer satisfies you. And that's always a sign that it was an egoic
Because I now need nicer things.
Yes.
And I need more square footage.
Yes.
Yes.
So nothing satisfies the ego for long. And therefore, it needs to continue to look for more. And of course, and this is to do also with the ego's need for future, because it's only by attaching undue importance to the future, because it's looking for more in the future moment. It seeks to complete itself at some point. It wants to attain something in addition to what you already have.
So how do we stop that and begin to be satisfied where we are, with what we have, and who we are?
Well, first of all, to see the illusion of seeking fulfillment in the future. Sometimes people need to have lived for a while to see that that's actually true.
Right.
That no matter what you achieve or what you attain, you're not satisfied for long. So what do we do about this? We realize that the thing that is of prime importance in our lives, we had always overlooked, and that's the ego in us had always overlooked that. And that thing that is of absolutely prime importance in our lives is the present moment. The present moment is actually the easiest exit point out of the ego state of consciousness, because when you're absolutely present in this moment, the ego can't survive. There's only conscious presence. The ego lives through past and future. It identifies with the past, but it's not a very happy identity. And it looks to the future where it wants this, that, or the other to complete itself.
Well, someone's asked me, during the week, someone asked me, what about our past memories that are pleasant? You have happy times,
Well, that's
pleasant
good.
memories.
Okay, and when you remember those memories, it's also the present moment. So no matter what you remember from the past, when those things happened, whether pleasant or unpleasant, did they happen in the past? That's what we say, okay, these things happened in the past, but of course they happened in the now, because nothing can happen in the past. There is only the now. And when you remember something from the past, when do you remember it?
Now.
And when you think of something that may happen in the future, when do you think of that?
Now.
And when then that thing actually happens, when does that happen?
Now.
So there is no life apart from now. And that is a very important realization for people to have, because the ego continuously overlooks the now. It thinks past and future are more important. It gives much more importance to past and future, and the now is just almost as if it didn't exist.
And what you're saying is that if we can learn to recondition ourselves to be present now, then we can be more alive.
Yes.
To do whatever it is going to be in the future.
Yes.
Because even when the future gets here, it will only be now.
Yes. The now is the foundation for the rest of your life, because the rest of your life will also be the now.
Got it. Madeline from Pennsylvania is 13 years old and is on the phone with a question. Madeline?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. On page 47, at the end of the second paragraph, the sentence reads, intense wanting that has no specific object can often be found in the still developing ego of teenagers, some of whom are in a permanent state of negativity and dissatisfaction.
Yes.
By stating this, are you implying that teenagers cannot be awakened, that although I'm reading this book, I may have no chance in reaching consciousness merely because I'm 13 and my ego is not fully developed?
Go Madeline. Go Madeline. I just think the fact that you could ask the question is pretty darn good.
Yes. Now, the first thing, you are more advanced than I was at 13.
Yeah. Than most of us, I'd say, yeah.
I would not have been able to read or understand that book when I was 13. So,
are you reading the book, Madeline?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's quite amazing.
That's quite amazing.
So it certainly does not mean that you cannot be awakened, because you're already awakening, because if you were not already awakening, the book would be completely meaningless to you.
Okay.
So there's a new generation growing up, and there are more youngsters now than before who may not have to go through the extreme egoic delusion that we had to go through in our generation. And you may be one of them. It doesn't mean perhaps that your ego will not develop at all. Your ego will develop, but I don't believe that you will be as trapped in ego as I had to be. I can't speak for Oprah. I know Oprah is fine now.
Oprah was trapped. Oprah was very trapped, Madeline. Oprah was very trapped.
So your chances are excellent. You're already awakening. It's wonderful to see.
Let me ask you this, though, Madeline. When you just read us that passage at the bottom of page 47, intense wanting that has no specific object can often be found in the still developing ego of teenagers. So what you're saying there is that the ego of teenagers is still in the process of becoming. Yes. And also, Madeline, don't you see it in your friends, this sort of intense wanting?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay. So I think that's what he was talking about.
Yes.
He was talking about all of your friends, but not you, Madeline.
Now, Madeline, do you detect intense wanting in yourself?
Yeah, occasionally.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
But you're not totally identified because you know it's there. There is an awareness there, isn't there?
Okay.
Are you understanding the book, Madeline?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, actually.
Wow.
What grade are you in, actually?
I'm in 8th grade.
8th grade. Okay. Well, great to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Were you in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania? That's what I hear.
Yep.
actually. Well, great.
Good.
Thank you. Keep reading.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to check our live emails again. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Wonderful.
13.
Yeah.
I couldn't have,
Yeah.
listen, I was in so much trouble at 13. I didn't have...
Me too.
Yes. Okay, as we make our way in the world, this is from Japan, Toyohashi, Japan. As we make our way in the world, being confident, assertive, are characteristics that help us get a job, that big promotion. I realize now that these are traits that are associated with ego. And so the question then becomes, how then does one move beyond the ego? Great question. How does one move beyond the ego?
Become aware of the ego is the first step.
But can't you still be the biggest jerk on earth and still just be aware of it and say, well, I'm a jerk. Boy, that sure is some big ego of mine. You know, you were talking earlier, I was thinking, you know, you can be in the moment still being one of those road raging people, road raging jerk in the moment, well, and aware that you're a road raging jerk in the moment.
It's unlikely that at that moment you are actually aware.
Really?
Because if you're aware, then you cannot be totally possessed
by
the ego, by the
ego.
form, the thought form,
Okay.
or the emotional form.
Okay.
If that
usually
dimension,
that's the pain body that's taken over.
Yes. Yeah. If the dimension of awareness is present, you are not totally in the grip of ego. And so, but the quickest way out of ego is to practice as much as possible living in the present moment, which means to give more attention to this moment than to the future or the past. To make this moment the primary factor in your life rather than future and past. Of course, you still use future and past for practical purposes. It helps to make an appointment, to go from here to there. It's all fine. It works very well.
But it means being present?
As much as possible, being open to whatever arises in the present moment. The word that I use, and I think it may be helpful for many people, is make friends with the present moment. Because the ego can't do that. The ego always is antagonistic. It wants, at best, it uses the present moment as a stepping stone because it wants to get to the next moment, which promises greater fulfillment, at best. But in many cases, the ego actually dislikes the pleasant moment. It resists the present moment. So if you can make the present moment into the primary focal point of your life and live, then ego will very quickly diminish in you because it cannot survive the present moment. So the ego...
So that's how you do it. That's how one moves beyond the ego.
Yes, the ego...
Be present.
Sorry, the ego lives as if people who are possessed by the ego live as if the present moment were their enemy. They are stressed, they want to get somewhere else. Whenever you need to, they're doing something, but they really already want to be at the end of their doing. Come on. They don't want to be where they are, they'd rather be somewhere else. They don't want to be who they are with. There's always a striving away from now internally. Yeah. And that's, of course, the dysfunction.
Yeah, I just had a moment like that today because I was waiting on somebody to get something ready, and they said, sorry, we're so sorry, we're going to hurry up, we're waiting. And I go, no, I took the lesson from the book. No, I'm just here being with myself.
Yes.
Not waiting on anything, because if you're waiting, you're in anticipation, and you're wanting to be out of that moment. That's right. Yes.
Waiting means you don't like this moment.
Right.
You'd rather have another moment. So whenever you are waiting, so to speak, why not practice being rather than waiting, which means completely inhabit this moment and feel your body, perhaps feel the energy you feel, and that's very, very, very pleasant to feel that you're alive.
All right. We have one last phone call. A question from Michelle in Philadelphia. Hello.
Hi, Oprah. How are you?
Fine. Good.
Yes. Hi, Eckhart.
Hello.
I'm just like a little bit so excited that you called me. My question was that I'm a little bit confused with Chapter 2. I understand the quote, if someone takes your shirt, let them have your coat as well. But where do you draw the line without getting walked all over? I do not want to be an egotistical person, but at the same time, I don't want to get taken advantage of.
Good question.
So I was having a little bit confusion with that.
Thank you. Yes.
Good.
Yes. all it says is sometimes letting go, there's more power in letting go than in clinging or hanging on to something. So there are situations when you actually become empowered when you let go rather than when you cling. It does not mean that people walk all over you. In fact, I say there are situations when you have to say no very clearly to a situation or to a person. But even that no can be of two different kinds. Usually the no is very negative. When you say no to a person says, I'll give you a ride home, and you see the person is drunk. Of course, you wouldn't say yes just to be pleasant. You say no. Now, do you say no with negative energy and in a state of resistance, or do you say no that is positive, where it simply means a clear and straightforward, no, I won't do that. This is very different from the resistance no.
Yeah.
So I call that the no that is not negative, a high quality no.
It's also looking at the reason why you would cling to the shirt. You can have my shirt if I'll give you the shirt if the reason why you're holding to the shirt is because you think the shirt is going to give you more value or you're operating from your ego when you're holding on to it.
Yes.
So you're saying be able to be in the state of presence
yes.
And awareness so that you can surrender whatever needs to be surrendered.
Yes.
That does not mean, and surrender does not mean allowing yourself to be walked over, but to be fully present so that you can be conscious
yes.
of what's always going on.
Yes.
So it means in some cases it's fine to say, here, you want it, take it. In other cases it's not,
yes.
depending upon what the situation is.
That's right.
Based upon the truth of who you are in any given moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I got that, Michelle.
Good.
I got that. Thank you
so
for
much.
asking the question. It helped me to get it. So let's close
Thank
with
you.
the peace that passes all understanding that you talk about on page 56. What is that peace?
That peace comes when you live in internal alignment with the present moment, which means what is, whatever is. When you no longer argue with what is, when you don't fight it internally, this present moment already, always is.
Even if it's a situation that you don't want.
Even if you don't want it, it is.
You must accept it first.
You accept first and then you take action.
Because that was the mud example you used last week.
Yes, you get...
Even if you're stuck in the mud.
This is where I am right now, I'm here. And then you take action, but that action no longer arises out of negativity, which is there when you don't like to be where you are, when you don't like this moment. Always friendly with the present moment, accepting the isness of the present moment, then move on from there. Then whatever action you take is actually empowered by life itself. When you're in a state of negativity or resistance, your action is not empowered by life. So it's not inspired and much less effective than action that comes out of the state of non-resistance.
Right. It's like last week when we were having problems, which neither you nor I knew until
Yes.
we had finished the class. And I said, we were doing a toast to everybody afterwards for all of their efforts. And I say, I'm going to accept it. I'm going to accept that we had a breakdown on the web. I'm going to accept it, and now let us correct it.
Yes, and it was everybody's lesson whose computer froze up. It was everybody's lesson to say, well, this is what is. And with that comes an inner peace that has nothing to do with what's happening
Not
or
resisting
not
it
happening.
and banging up the computer
Yes.
and, oh my God. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the peace that passes all understanding, because the peace cannot be explained with reference to external events. It's there because you live in alignment with the present moment. That's the peace.
That is the peace, living in alignment. Before we say goodbye, I'd like to thank you for being with Eckhart and with me, and we'll be here again next Monday at 8 p.m. Central. Don't forget, if you want to experience this class again or tell a friend who missed it, our webcast is available on demand tomorrow for free here at Oprah.com. Is that noon, Dean? Beginning at noon? Beginning at noon. You can start to download. And if you want to download a podcast of this class, you can do that tomorrow at Oprah.com and iTunes. Your assignment for our next class is to update your workbook and spend this week rereading and thinking about Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is all about the core of ego. So do your homework, and we'll see you next Monday night. I thank you again, Eckhart.
Thank you.
This is the coolest?
Yes.
And thank you so much to all of you. It's been wonderful. Thank you, everybody, all over the world. Good night, good day, good morning. Goodbye.